Welcome to Tagat Kokob.
Thank you for having me, Tigrayans.
It's my pleasure. I think some of my listeners and viewers will know you from maybe from your book that we will talk about, and from interviews that you have done with other channels. But for those who might not know you, how would you describe yourself?
Okay. Um, I think I'll start with my name. My name is Kokob Gebru. I say professionally, I'm a mental health specialist and researcher and a human rights defender. My work mostly centers around mental health and psychosocial support, uh, protection, and also some related to education. And currently I'm also pursuing my PhD. I'm focusing on trauma resilience for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence in Tigray. This is also just not a research. It's something that's, of course, very deeply personal for me as a Tigrayti woman. And I was born and raised in Maqala, in Tigray. I attended my school years and then undergrad, postgraduate studies in Tigray, in Maqala as well. Currently my PhD is in the Netherlands at Leiden University Medical Center. I think I would like to say I was a very good student growing up. I hope my teachers will agree. But other than that, outside of work and study, I'm someone who deeply enjoys the company of my loved ones, uh, traveling, because that's the way I get to know and learn about the world. When it comes to the work that I've done so far, as the mental health, in the area of mental health, I worked as a lecturer and clinician. And during that time, of course, it was before the war in Tigray and after the war. I was working in Tigray, and I also did protection-related work with different NGOs, especially focusing on gender-based violence, from prevention to mitigation and providing response. I always integrate mental health into the work that I do. So as an educator, and later on, of course, trying to integrate mental health and psychosocial support into the education system in Tigray as well. I've done some advisory work with the Regional Health Bureau, Women Affairs Bureau, and Education Bureau in Tigray. Trying to create a trauma-informed system to the best that I can. So, and I've also done published multiple research so far on the consequences related to what happened in Tigray. Related to mental health, gender-based violence, and the healthcare system generally. And of course, recently I have written a book on self-care guide for healthcare workers. I think that's about the work that I've done so far. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, and brilliant, Caro. And I think if someone is doing a PhD, I should go without saying that they must have been a good student. Nothing against people who don't have PhD, but I think that's true in general.
I think that's
That's
Professor
completely
Lee.
accepted. Um, but um, but not if you take 10 years to finish the PhD, like it seems to be taking me to finish.
I'm
Um,
right there with you.
yeah, I have a lot of explaining to do as to why. But maybe we'll come to the subject matter of your PhD towards the end, Kohob, if you don't mind. And you've given us a lot of sort of themes that we could explore in this conversation. And I thought we might we would start with the trauma issue, because it is a subject that is omnipresent in Tigray now. Everybody talks about it because of the devastation that the war has left in its wake. We hear that more than 120,000 Tigrayan women have been raped, and the trauma that comes from that. And we know about the economic devastation that was caused in Tigray as well, and there is trauma that comes from that. And you'll tell us later there are a lot of other traumas as well in Tigray. But mostly when you hear people talk about these issues, they talk in abstract terms. But you are someone who has been there, who has experienced it, who has tried to help others, and who has written a book about self-help and self-care, about how people who seek to provide support should support themselves. So if you could, in your own words, Kokob, give us a picture of what the trauma in Tigray is like. I think that would be useful to a lot of people listening to us.
Okay. Thank you for that question. Yes, I think it's very multi-layered when we look at the trauma that's experienced in Tigray because of the war. There are individuals, people, communities that have endured direct trauma, direct traumatic experiences that lead to developing very serious traumatic disorders. It could be acute stress disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and the like. And like you said, we have seen the widespread weaponized systematic sexual violence that took place in Tigray that affected many women, and that leaves like a heavy traumatic experience. And we also see a lot of people who were physically injured in shellings during the war, even our TDF. We also have people who were displaced from their homes, who still are displaced, who still continue to experience this exposure to the traumatic experience. And all of this and so much more, of course, I'm only stating this as an example, it leads to high levels of, not necessarily, but it does expose you to develop high levels of traumatic stress disorders. And at the same time, there are people who witness this happening. Children who've seen their mothers being raped. Sons, husbands that were forced to act these violences in front of other family members. These violences were also systematically committed in front of community members, family members. So not only that, seeing the people you love being murdered in front of your eyes, that also leads to developing this kind of traumatic stress disorders. And at the same time, even I think the second layer we can look at is the secondary trauma, like you were raising earlier. Of course, for people who are always listening to the trauma that was experienced by others in details every day, especially the frontline workers, it could be healthcare workers, it could be police officers, it could be case workers, humanitarian workers. Generally, for people who always are in the front lines and in a helping role, but listening to everything in detail, that also leads to secondary or vicarious trauma. And then we can also see at a collective level, collectively, even if you have not experienced direct trauma yourself, Because when we say trauma, it's not only developing the disorders, which of course has its own criteria, like what we raised. Either you have to face it directly, witness it, or it's in a secondary trauma, like the exposures. But collective trauma, when homogeneous people like us in Tigray, when you go through a very difficult, devastating situation as people together, it kind of changed the course of the existence, the social fabric, the way we perceive ourselves and the way we relate to the world. And that is called collective trauma. And how it's, for example, how there's collective traumas. For example, it's slavery, it's genocides, it could be natural disasters. But when people talk, there's always before it, after it. So it's like a critical juncture that has left a mark in the people's collective memory. So in Tigray, we always say before the war, after the war, and we say before the siege, after the siege. And because these moments in our lives have left traumatic experience in our collective memory. So it doesn't mean maybe I was not directly impacted, but I always lived in that sense of this could happen to me. This is happening to my people. Why is it happening to my people? And there are also many, many sufferings, because not everything is trauma, because a lot of it is stress-related disorders. It could be something related to depressive disorders. It could also trigger a past traumatic experience in our lives. And generally, the mental health and psychosocial distresses are many in this kind of situation. And in collective trauma, I think a most important thing to look at is how it also breaks the social fabric. So when this kind of situations happen, the homogeneous people would in the same kind of belief system, culture, sharing the same identity, you become very tight most of the time. You become very tight because there is something external that's happening that you need to move past, that you need to fight together. But then when that passes, it actually attacks your social fabric in many ways. You lose trust in each other. You lose trust in the systems that were there. And also there is this cultural attacking the culture at the same time. You see the churches, the religious institutions generally, all the other systems or belief systems that we've had, they are attacked, and these are the custodians of the people in many ways. And that also, and rituals, like collective rituals, like not being able to grieve together when you lose someone, not being able to bury a loved one. And at the same time, it later on, it also maybe creates some sort of resentment in the in-group, not with the out-group, like within the in-group, like within, for example, it could be because someone didn't lose any of their children, but another mother has lost all her children. It could be because someone was lobbying for your kid to go to war, or, for many, many reasons. Maybe you fear that someone is going to report you for something. So there's always just that fear that goes there. And collectively, there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of aggression that goes with it. That could maybe later lead to a lot of violence and pain. And that is also exacerbated by the fact that the systems are actually attacked, and they don't exist anymore. They're not strong anymore. And it also adds to it. And like you said, as a consequence of all of this happening, we can say the lack of economic growth, economic free, like not being economically strong as individuals and as a community. Because when we talk about mental health, it always starts with safety and security. You have to be able to have your basic needs met. That's also part of mental health and psychosocial support. You have to have a sense of security. So if there is an ongoing security threat, can you actually feel okay? So it breaks the political, social, economic aspects of the community after the war. And not even with all this trauma, imagine not being able to get the service that you require to actually help you in your healing journey. And the system always not allowing you to have, not creating the space that you need to heal, because healing is still it's not about just the emotional healing. It's very it's holistic, So yeah, all in all of this is how I would describe the trauma related to Tigray currently.
And of course, with your book, which we'll come to in some detail, you're trying to create that space where people could heal. But if I could say a few words about the resentment and the anger that seems to be prevalent in Tigray today, Kokob, because that strikes me as a very important point and something that could explain the political dysfunction today. I mean, I don't intend to drag it into politics, but one thing that I observe is when people speak in public today in Tigray, you could see at least a whiff of resentment and anger always. So what they say as a political solution to Tigray, as a strategy, as a direction, comes from that place, that dark place of anger and resentment. And the problem sometimes, to me, is it verges on the self-blaming for the genocide, for instance. People are justifiably angry about the political establishment, but if you are somebody who is not traumatized by the Tigray war, it is maybe easier to draw a distinction between that and not blaming Tigrayan political establishment generally for what was done to Tigray in terms of the siege and the starvation and the collective punishment and all that. But I sense that that line has been blurred, and the reason is because there is anger and there is resentment, and that anger and resentment comes from the places that you're describing, the trauma. And if I might connect you to a wider problem in Tigray, even before the past maybe 50 years, the Tigrayan journey has been so painful. We fought against the Derg for 17 years. The Derg unleashed all sorts of atrocities, and we have never had a conversation about how to heal from that trauma. And then this one followed, and we're not having a conversation about how to heal from that. But we are at the same time trying to do politics in the right way. And I wonder what the effect of not having that conversation is on our public discourse, on our sense of being generally, on our condition.
Okay, so for me, what you described, I mean, we cannot only attribute people's questions to anger and resentment, because I'm sure people have a lot of valid questions when it comes to asking the government, because leadership is really key. Political stability is key for healing. So at this point, for me, is because there is a lack of, to move forward. For example, let me raise one thing. Justice is very important, and justice is a key component of healing. But that hasn't happened yet. People have lost so much, and because when we talk about justice, for example, because I see people separating justice and healing sometimes, but it becomes important because, for example, one, it acknowledges the harm that you went through. It validates what you've experienced, right? So that's really important. So I think the main questions is there, one of the main questions of the people is that, and the second one is it's actually like, for example, imagine looking at the people who have caused you all this harm, walking freely while you carry the burden of it. You carry all this burden and you don't even know how to continue, but you see people living their lives, perpetrators of this war, and everyone. And also, there is, as I said, there is a lack, like a distortion of trust, a lack of trust between the systems, not just government. It could also be religious institutions, because of what we've seen. So when there is justice, also it kind of brings out the trust in the system, brings back the trust in the system, and it also restores the agency of people. At the same time, it brings it gives people the sense of control, and that is something that lacks right now in Tigray. And at the same time, it is the space to heal. Can you imagine you've been through this devastating experience, and there's no way moving forward because you're constantly thinking as if it's happening again. It's happening again. And I believe that people trust the political system to actually look after them when it comes to this. Because if there isn't political stability, social stability, like I said earlier, it's hard for people to actually find the space to heal, to process their anger. So people are, of course, we also see a lot of, as I mentioned, a lot of violences that kind of come from those experiences. Of course, there is no way to justify violence, no matter where it comes from, but there's a responsibility to actually create the space for healing, create the stable systems for healing, because there's part of the community, part of the system that takes that responsibility, and that main role goes to the government, in my belief. So I think it's a lot of things. It's not just solely because of the issues that we talked about earlier, the emotional distresses that people, or resentments or aggressions people are feeling. I think, I don't know. I think there's more to it, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Also, my question was a bit all over the place, but I think you gave us a good insight into what is happening there. And I think one relevant aspect is what you said in terms of how people experience the fact that people who perpetrated the most serious crimes are walking freely, and how that might be exasperating the sense of injustice in Tigray, and the role that plays to worsening to the heavy trauma that people are carrying. So that is from the point of view of the people who perpetrated the crimes. But also, I think there was another interesting point that you mentioned, that the resentment in Tigray. So, for instance, what does it make people feel the fact that there were some politicians who pushed people to send their children to war, and they didn't send their own children, I mean the politicians, and they are safe now, and they are back to power, and they are doing all sorts of crimes and all sorts of corruption and the thing that characterized Tigrayan politics before the genocide, and they are back, and they are doing exactly the same thing. They're not trying to do something new, something that would redress the trauma, something that would compensate the people. And I wonder what that makes the Tigrayan people feel in terms of the trauma. Kokob, I don't know if I'm clear.
Yeah. I mean, for me, generally, I would say there's a lot of responsibility that comes from being in leadership. And especially when the people have gone through this kind of, like, I don't know, I don't even know how to describe it sometimes, but it's a very, a painful experience. Not only it's collective as well. So it really needs to be meticulously planned on how we can integrate trauma-informed leadership, trauma-informed systems to make sure that we acknowledge what happened, we acknowledge the pain, we create path for healing, and we also create systems for growth. If that is not in place, people live in the past experiences, still not dealing with the pain, and people find different means of sources of outlets for it, very unhealthy sources of outlets for it. So the government does play a big role in this, and there is, as I said, there will be multiple resentments towards the government, it could be based on facts or not, because right now people, that's one outlet that they have as well, and into the different systems, people don't feel like education is the way to go right now. We can maybe raise it later on. People don't feel like the religious institutions like they don't have that connection, maybe because of the involvement in the war and so many things. So because everyone has a role, it feels like people are also going to hold you accountable if you're not doing that. So yeah, that's how I view it. But in the way we express it, there's going to be a lot of anger. Maybe there could be a lot of anger, resentment associated or violence associated with it, because we have not created the healthy space for healthy outlets. Yeah.
What I was reading an article related to how people generally cope with some serious experiences like war and genocide. And one of the points is the author made, and I apologize to our viewers because I don't remember the name of the author, so I couldn't I couldn't point people to read it. But one of the points is the author made it that it is generally a good idea to make the people who were public faces during the experience, to make them disappear from public face, not necessarily because they have committed crime, not necessarily because they have perpetrated anything, but because people are likely to associate the experience with the people because by virtue of the fact that they were public faces. But on the contrary, in Tigray, everyone who was involved in the war and during the experience is back to their positions, from all sides, from the Tigray side, from the Ethiopian side, from the Eritrean side. And I wonder what the implications of that are to the Tigrayan people. I mean, you briefly mentioned that, but I have been wondering about that as well. But more broadly, Kokob, you have written a book, and we'll come to the specific points you make and the recommendations and advice you give to people to help them deal with trauma. So broadly speaking, what are the challenges now in Tigray in terms of the healing process?
Okay. Okay. Before I go into that one, can I raise one more point in the different layers that I was mentioning earlier? There's one that's the transgenerational trauma or intergenerational trauma. And this is also something we need to be very careful about, because this kind of trauma, it does not affect only the people that have gone through these experiences in the different layers that we discussed earlier. Because this one also goes beyond us to the generation that did not actually experience these violences. And it's in the way we share the stories. It's in the way we pass our history. And also it's in the way we behave as parents, as their teachers, as their aunt, uncles, family members generally. So children take, because this if we don't heal properly, they shape us. That we're saying they shape us as individuals and as a community. This can shape us in a way that also continues to shape the next generation. So working on ourselves individually and collectively actually saves the next generation. And for me, healing is an act of revolution, an act of resistance, because we have to say we have to say no to the experiences that are trying to put us down, that are trying to create all this chains around us. So, and
I mean, on that point, just to add something, and maybe you could reflect on that, Kokob. I mean, Tigrayan music, by and large, is nostalgic, and there is a lot of lamentation generally. And music is, of course, one tool that a generation passes values and customs and ways of doing things to the next generation. And if music is done in a certain way, that's going to inevitably have an effect on the next generation as well. So I think that's a powerful point. I'm actually you making. What is the impact of pain and our trauma to the next generation? Yes, but sorry, I interrupted you. Yeah.
No. That's very important. It's because art is a powerful tool. I mean, it's important we preserve our history, we document what happened, and then we move in a way to ensure it doesn't happen again. And it's a chance to create a safer world for the next generation, because we know how bad it could get. And the art, music really plays a big role in that storytelling. And the way we document is really important as well. So it's also a reminder that everyone plays a role, right, in this healing process. No matter what field you have, no matter what talents you have, you can really use it to contribute to the healing of Tigray. So I think that's important to note. Thank you.
So if you could get back to the question I posed earlier, Kokob, in terms of the challenge in Tigray. Yeah. So you can continue.
Yes. So, I mean, again, it's a multi-layered when we talk about the challenges. We can start by the lack of awareness about mental health. This started from before the war. There's the mental health space was like very small in terms of awareness, in terms of healthcare, mental health service providers in general, and the capacity in general, and in the resources that were allocated to it, and in the attention it was given. So, I mean, during COVID, like there was a little bit of improvement. We were trying to integrate MHPSS in the different aspects for the emergency response. So there was a little bit of movement that I feel like did help a bit when it came to war, because people understood that it was a crisis, like it was an emergency, and how to move forward. But other than that, that lack of awareness in the community, and yeah, and a lot of people are, I would say, in denial about the existence of mental health at a larger scale, um, even before the war. So that plays a big role, even until now, for people aren't able to identify what these reactions are, where they need to go. But even if they knew where to go, there isn't a system in place that can hold this kind of prevalence when it comes to the need of mental health, to the mental health needs in Tigray. And when I say system, it's in the healthcare system, it's in the social work, like in the social system, and even at the same time, capacity-wise, we were not trained to handle this level of trauma. Yeah, even as experts, even the ones that are there. And another challenge was because we stayed in siege for a long time, it was very difficult to devise, like to start implementing as quick as we should have. Because you need to update yourself, you need to communicate with the outside world to find the tools that will actually work best in this kind of situations. And on top of that, there isn't leadership-wise, even so mental health and psychosocial support is like a marriage, a relationship between mental health, which is more on the medical side. There's the psychology, and then there's the social work, right? Psychology is on the more emotional well-being, talk therapy side. And then there is social work, that because it's holistic, you have to also intervene in that area. But these systems did not coexist together. So they were separately being moved around by different bodies. So creating that unity, it takes time. It's still a work in progress. And also, there isn't like a well-coordinated body that leads this interventions. There are a lot of amazing individuals on the ground that try to work on this, and unfortunately, most of it is led by NGOs. It was led by different NGOs, and when the funding is not there, when NGOs move to another crisis, of course, this space is again remaining in its fragile state. On top of that, commitment from leadership, I would say, when it comes to mental health, is always seen as a secondary priority. It's never been on the top of a priority. That also is very disappointing, because you always have to fight to include mental health, mainstream it, or yeah. That's also another challenge, and resources, like financial resources. A lot of organizations would. Okay, it's interesting because we have this layer of intervention. So we say there are 4 layers. There is the first layer 1 up to 4 levels of intervention. So the first one is basically like what I was mentioning earlier. So it's like a pyramid where the large community, during crisis, when provided information, when provided shelter, food, safety and security, people will eventually would lessen their distresses. The second layer is community-based interventions. So community-based intervention is to integrate the different interventions within the community structures so that people have access to them, because you heal from connecting, from social interactions, and from knowing you share the same experiences. And the third layer is the focused but non-specialized interventions, where you train people for a short period of time, and they're able to provide different kind of technological interventions. But that's the third layer. But then the fourth layer, which it's the top of the pyramid, it means only a few people go there. It's the specialized, basically with medication, with therapy, those kind of support. So when we integrated this, so it means information. I see a lot of NGOs thinking, okay, so we can say MHPSS provide information, and then you say MHPSS mental health and psychosocial support provided for 500 people, for 300 people. That's the report you get. But when you actually look at it, what kind of service was actually provided? And did you measure the outcome? So those things were lacking in that environment. And I think all of this adds up to the system not barely existing in Tigray, and of course also not having well-researched indigenous community-based interventions as well. So the lack of research, I would say.
What I think that is a comprehensive list of serious challenges, and if we could draw on the lack of awareness problem, Kokob, I was telling you before we started recording that when I was when I was in Tigray, the way people who had, one might describe it as mental problem, one might describe it as people who were a little bit different, a little bit wayward, a little bit deviant. The way they were described was that they are beyond redemption. Of course, there were some attempts, for instance, to take them to my Charlotte, but that was pretty much it. It wasn't mental health or mental problem generally were not perceived as problems that could be solved through the right support system. And my fear now, of course, this is a different scale. We're talking about post-genocide trauma, but my fear is that people might accept what they are going through as a given, as a fact of life, and they might not talk about it. And in your book, for instance, you provide a lot of very useful pieces of advice and recommendations and suggestions that are useful even to people who are having a bit of a struggle in their lives and all that. But as I was reading through the page, I was asking myself what people would seek this advice only if they are aware that they have the problem in the first place. And I wonder what you say about that. How do we educate people that if they are experiencing certain things, it's all right to seek support?
Yeah, it's like you said, the awareness level for mental health, especially before the war, because there's one point I want to raise, especially before the war, we only thought about mental health of that 1% worldwide, where it's more psychotic disorders, schizophrenia, schizoaffective, and all that, or bipolar disorders, where there is a lot of visible acute symptoms associated with it, like being violent, being incoherent, like having thought and speech disturbances, perception, hallucinations, and all that. But if you see in the world, like in all the in hundreds of mental health disorders that happen all over the world, there's only 1% that has those psychotic maybe disorders, up to 1%. But that's the only ones that we know of. And even for me in my clinical practice, like experience, it's only people who have reached that level most of the time. Of course, there are exceptions that would come, and you would see our wards would be just, oh, the patient's bipolar, like, or like in the psychotic disorder. Of course, there are different types, but like around those. And it also shows that experience. And a lot of the clients that we got came chained, forced by family members, because it has gotten to that level. And sometimes people would only notice it because those disorders even can stay, you can start showing symptoms a year ago, like even from years before, but they were just not being noticed. And when you have those acute symptoms is when actually people recognize it. So that's what we've faced in the past years. And because there isn't open communication about our emotions, about how we feel, I don't think we have created that space as a community where it's okay to be emotional, it's okay to talk about your emotions, to put words to describe them, because it gets confusing sometimes because you don't know how to speak about it. And sometimes it's even easier to speak in English, or because you hear them being talked about in that language, and it makes it easier for you to speak in that foreign language and to describe your emotions rather than your own, because and it's also our religious.
That's interesting. It's like many people in Tigray, for instance, would all of a sudden say sex because they don't want to say it in Tigrinya, right? And you could expand that to other uncomfortable issues.
Yeah.
And I could imagine the same problems happening in mental health related issues as well, where people can't dare say what it is that they are feeling because there is a degree of taboo associated with it.
Even not only the taboo, even like putting the actual words to it, because it's not something you've heard being said multiple times. It's not, of course, it's not always the same for everyone, and it's not, I don't think it's because the lack of vocabulary, because I know Tigrinya is very rich language, but yeah, you see those things, and it just yeah. I have lost my thought there. I had one point that I wanted to make. But when it comes to those issues of mental health, even with the religious institutions, you see how different it is. Because some people would come to you and they said, oh, the priest told us to come here. Because they said, oh, this is like a mental health challenge. Please go and get a chat. And some people are like, when we have to take our like when we want to go to the holy waters, because we encourage people, we tell everyone it's all from God. So if you want to take medication, if you want to take holy water, just do it together, so when they go to churches, and it's like they're told you can't play with two jerseys, so you have to pick. So that's also something that they would tell us. And this is during the clinical practices. So even in the system, there's always, it's like based on individuals sometimes, on who you get. Because people would spend like 10 years in holy water, traveling all over Tigray, and then they would come. but early detection means like better prognosis, you know? And also there's this thing with mental health medication that's like, it's all talked about as if it's addictive. So people are like, oh, it's addictive, it's addictive. I mean, there's a group of drugs that could be addictive and we don't even prescribe them for long term, just like a week or two max, you know? And the others is like just any other medication, but because of the nature of the disorders, you take it for longer time. And it's not something that's incurable. Like, we have to understand the brain is just another organ in our body. If your heart can get sick, if your livers, your kidneys can get sick, your brain can also be sick. But when it's your brain, it is the motor, like it is the driving force in your reasoning and in the way you act, you behave. So of course you're gonna act different, you're gonna talk different, you're gonna feel different. And I can't fully say, oh, it's curable, but it's treatable with the right treatment, but with the right support system as well. So it's not because you have medication, it's because you have to also have a good support system. You have to have like additional therapies other than medication. You have to have like a routine that you develop, engagement in your life. You know, you also have to work for it. And for mental health, it's also a lot of work that depends on you. That's also what makes it difficult. It requires a lot of discipline, a lot of hard work, and also it also is associated with how you were brought up, like physically, and then in the family dynamics, and if you're using any other substance, you know, and if there's a family history sometimes. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, and it makes it like the work is all about listening to people, learning, mapping all their lives, and you know, the only thing you can do is guide and provide support, and a lot of the work also depends on the individual. So yeah, that's why it makes it's not like maybe taking a medication for a headache and it goes away. So that's why it's there. And unfortunately, we don't have the diversity of medications available. So we only have a few medications available. And yeah, it makes it a bit more difficult to kind of provide the best kind of care that we would like to. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if I'm answering the question.
No, you are, and I mean, we might come back if there are issues that we haven't covered, so no problem.
Yeah.
But I think it's a fascinating point you made in terms of how people make a distinction between how they see problems related to the heart, for instance, and the brain. And I think that I could be wrong, but at least part of the reason is that the people's behavior and thought processes and stuff like that are seen as things that come from outside. They are not perceived as results of a physical process, and therefore if a person is behaving in a strange way, people are tempted to conclude that there is nothing that could be done, because it's the soul, it's, you know, intangible thing, and a doctor or a mental health professional couldn't get hold of the problem. I think that is how people understand the problem. Maybe not just in Tigray. I think this is a human problem generally. The way we perceive mental things is a bit different. And I think that comes from a misunderstanding of the distinction between the mind and the brain and how things work and stuff like that. But I think one point that he came back to, because it's such an important point, Kokob, with what is said in terms of failing to do early detection. I think that's, and in a way, it is the opposite of the problem that people complain here in the West, people in the West, especially of sort of right-wing persuasion, say that the mental health is being overdiagnosed, so that when people feel stressed a little bit in their job, and when they have some personal problem that they should manage, they are more likely to attribute it to mental problem and to seek advice when they shouldn't. So that is the complaint generally here in Sweden, for instance. And in Sweden, mental health is given a lot of weight. But in Tigray is the opposite problem, where people have accepted trauma and mental health problem as a result of a genocide as a normal thing. And I think maybe one manifestation of that is something that I mentioned earlier, Kokob. When you have a conversation with a Tigrayan these days, invariably, like you said, they will tell you they are a different person because of the war. So they have changed. And in some sense, of course, it's welcome. It's supposed to change after such a serious experience. But in other senses, maybe it's not good that you have changed. And it's maybe that means that you should seek help. But I think people, including me, and I have changed a lot, I don't know the boundary between the change that I should welcome and the change that are not good for me.
Yeah. I think though I will start by making one point because we're also talking about the awareness, and I wanted to raise one point because there's a lot of change in the way people perceive mental health now, I would say, after the war. And I always say, as bad as as terrible as it is, there's a bit of silver lining that I see there, that people are more open to learn about it. They're more open to talk about it. Even the fact, a lot of people say, talk about trauma, even some of it like not in the correct context or in a way. But for me, it's like, oh, they're identifying something. They're willing to learn about it. Because I had, like, during the siege, I trained like hundreds of young people. Like, I think we trained up to 300 young people that wanted to know about mental health. So with my colleagues, we just like allocating sessions. We would train them and things like that. And people would come to your house because it was a siege. They would leave you notes asking, can you give them time to, like, they want to learn more about it. And like you said, people have changed in a way also. There is growth. It has defined their sense of like purpose and the way they see the world. And it kind of gives you, like, to the other side, an understanding of what's important in life. Because we didn't have anything. We had each other. And when, when we are traveling to other parts of the world and you talk about, we didn't have banking, there was active war, there were active violence, you were under siege, no communication. And people would ask you, like, but how do you survive? It's to a point where people don't believe it. That's how difficult the situation was. And going through this, like I said, I mean, post-war, there's a lot of, like, during war, like during violences, there's a lot of agency that you see in people that surprises you, that gives you courage. I saw it in working with the survivors of sexual violence during the war, during the siege, and it's really amazes and inspires you. But not everyone responds the same way. And there's a lot of traumatic growth, like what I was mentioning with the young people. They started to organize. They started forming organizations, movements. They want to learn more about it, about mental health. Like, they want to mobilize to support other parts of the community, you know? So, and there's a lot of reflection about what you are, who you are, what you want in life at the same time. But for this, there's a lot of factors that play into it, starting from how you were brought up, what your previous experiences were, and where you are right now, and what kind of support you have, what kind of exposure you have. So it goes into these different ways. So that's why for us, we need to make sure that people have those spaces to help them in their healing journey, to guide them in their healing journey, so that to identify, to be able to, to be resilient. Because we talk about like, oh, everyone's resilient, like we are resilient people, but resilience is not just being able to carry pain. It's to notice it, to sit with it, to process it, to make sure it doesn't happen again, to make meaning out of it. But it also depends, like when we say collective and cultural trauma, the meaning that you make out of that experience is what's really going to make or break it for you as people. So these are the different sides that you see. I see a lot of hope, but I also I'm concerned with a lot of things that I see. And yeah, as an expert, I take responsibility, but I also believe it needs to be at a system level. Yeah.
Well, I think there is a lot of aspects relating to trauma that we could discuss all day. But in the interest of time, Carl, because you have to go, we're going to round up this segment of the conversation. But maybe it could be good if you could give pointers to our viewers about what could they get from your book, and also tell them where they could find your book and all that.
Yeah, so for the book, I think I can start maybe talking about what the book is, or do you
Yep.
want to?
Yep.
Yeah. So I want to talk about how I came to develop this guide is because I was working at the One Stop Center, providing trauma supports for survivors of sexual violence, survivors during the siege mainly at Aider. And during that time, for me, it's a very difficult experience because I look at it as a clinician. I experienced it as a woman. I experienced it as a Tigrayan and as a professional who's trying to provide services with almost to nothing, zero resources. And it adds a lot of responsibility, more than any other time. And there's always that fear of you could be next as well. And it was one of the most difficult experiences for me. But I also saw how it was for my colleagues there, the ones that have served there before me, that have started to work there years before me, and that are still continuing to work there as caseworkers, as prosecutors, as clinicians, health service providers. And when you are in that kind of place, you're always on survival mode. You don't realize the toll it's taking on your body, on your mental health, and also on the relationships, on the people around you, how it affects that relationship. And for me, when I took the time off, which I was very privileged to go to school and to study, and then I wasn't in that space anymore, I really felt everything. When I really had that time for myself, I felt everything, mentally, physically, emotionally, and I went to a functional freeze where I couldn't do anything, you know? But imagine I'm someone that knows what techniques to use, like how to cope with this kind of situations, who to ask for help. And I have an amazing support system in my life. And I thought to myself, like, imagine what the other providers could be going through with this system not being there. So I applied for a fellowship, and then with this concept, and I was able to get it. And yeah, I developed a self-care guide. It was reviewed by my colleagues, mental health experts and clinical psychologists as well. And it is going to be in Tigrayan, of course, and it was translated to Tigrayan. And there, what I look at is more of the things you can do. Because honestly, to train these sessions, we would have like a lot of resources, like hotels, like a lot of money, a lot of fee for experts, like thousands of dollars to hold this kind of sessions. And those are the things, like not even everything. You don't get it in that short session. So what I can do is to provide, it has like different chapters. The first one is the general understanding of how you would react in regards to trauma, like secondary trauma, like burnout, compassion fatigue. So all of this, right? And then it also gives you like the techniques on the second chapter of, because these techniques, I always say it's like building muscle. So if you don't go to the gym and eat healthy, have the right amount of protein or anything like that, you won't have muscles, right? Your body is not going to get that strength. And it's the same with your brain. We have to train it to cope with situations, right? To learn. So yeah, those were the things, because you don't get up today and know how to handle it when there's a lot of like a stressful situation that's going there. So self-care, like that's why it has like this step-by-step techniques to help guide people. They can read and they can practice. So not everyone works for everyone. It's not a one size fits all situation. That's why I sort of have like multiple techniques that they can use, like from journaling, deep breathing, grounding, like body scan, like there even the diets, like spiritual, like things like that they can adopt to their own thing. And then another important thing for me is collective healing. We cannot just heal as an individual and everything is not going to be okay. We have to look after each other. We have to connect to build solidarity, and community is always important. So that's why we have like what to do as a collective, like as a group. And then there's the fourth chapter that is for leadership, because trauma-informed leadership needs to be, like trauma-informed systems need to be created generally. And at the same time, there's the last chapter of the chapter 5, it's like the annex chapter, which has like tools for you to do self-assessments to check where you are, and to have like the daily planning, or group planning, or self and collective care activities that you can do as a group. Having said that, there's always one important point I want to raise when I talk about self-care, because some people feel like it's a luxury in this moment, and especially in the absence of food, in the absence of safety, justice, and stable systems. Asking someone to practice self-care can feel very empty, or sometimes it might even feel a bit offensive, I would say. But it's very important because it's about survival. Because for people like us who've gone through this kind of like horrendous situation, the stress is chronic, and we are always and also this continuous instability that we are facing right now, it kind of puts us in the survival mode, where we are still in the flight or fight mode. And the small acts of grounding ourselves, practicing the breathing techniques, and seeking community support is life-saving at this point. And the collective care is also very important aspect. This is not to replace the system. It is a response to the absence of them. And some of these techniques, people might already know about them very well. Some may be new, But the important thing in self-care is to be intentional about it, to intentionally weave it into our day-to-day practices. And that's how it could work. Like it's like I've shared it to the regional health bureau. It's been shared to all the healthcare institutions, like for the digital part, digitally. Currently, I'm working and tailoring it to teachers as frontline workers as well. I'm collaborating with some organizations, so we're going to do a teacher's version of it. Yeah, we've only made a few copies. We're still going to do a few copies, and we have actually won a grant right now, and we're working on measuring its impact within the healthcare system, because of course it has to be researched as well. But yeah, I think that's the update. Yeah, I will check. It will be in the, I will share the link with you maybe, because it will be in the, where I got the fellowship, the Global Health Partnerships, they will have it in their website.
Well, indeed, and maybe to add some information about the book, its title in its Tigrinya rendition is መጽሐፍ ዓርሰም ክንክን, right?
Yeah.
And it's freely available, or else I have a pirated copy. It's freely available. All right. Yeah, so people could download it from the website of where you have your fellowship, I think. And one thing I would say about the book, of course, I have read it in preparation for this interview. And although it is targeted, as you say, to your fellow professionals, to people in Tigray who are trying to provide support to other people, I think he used the technical term vicarious trauma, trauma experienced through working with people who have trauma by owing to the fact that it's something so serious that it affects you. Although in Tigray, I think it's fair to say that everybody has first-hand trauma, given the magnitude of things that happened. But one thing I should say in terms of my own experience reading the book is that it was useful for me. And I'm someone who, in typical Tigrayan dismissiveness when it comes to mental health issues, I was a bit dismissive. I think, for the reasons that you mentioned, I tended to say, I think I know how to cope. I know what the coping mechanism, I do sport and all that. But it was very, very useful, even for me, who came from that sort of mentality. So I would recommend people to read it, even though they are not providing mental health support. Just if you could give me 10 minutes, Kokob, I would like to talk to you about the other side projects maybe you have been involved in. And one of them that I'm really excited to talk about is education. I think generally the broad sort of spirit within which you are working is trying to get the Tigrayan society back on its feet. And my sense is that you see health and education and human rights as components in that, and that's why you've been working on education as well. And one thing that I found interesting is the idea of using some innovative methods to make sure that education, even in its limited maybe form, continues running during war and during interruptions, and where there is security problem, where children couldn't go to school physically. I found the idea fascinating, the idea of trying to have a parallel education system that could function in those less than ideal circumstances. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the reasons also that I'm very interested in education is also because both my parents were teachers. So growing up in that kind of household, education is everything. And I've seen how it has changed my life, how it has improved every aspect of uh, my being, and I would like to make sure, yeah, a lot of people get that opportunity. And for me, when it comes to education, like you said, I've had like different engagements from like trying to integrate the mental health aspects, the trauma-informed education, post-war in Tigray, working, advising the Education Bureau, though I would say it wasn't implemented. One of the things that always disappoint me. And of course, currently the She Heals, We Heal project, trying to create safe spaces for young girls in Tigray post-war. So I'm going to come to the other project that you mentioned. I think you're talking about the Digital Innovation Skills Hub project that we did during the war. Um, Before that, I'll come to the She Heals, We Heal project, which we found to be one of the most powerful projects that we've done. And for that is we created safe spaces in 5 schools in Tigray for young girls to have a healing space, a space they call their own, a space they can be themselves, and a space that's judgment free. And they own the space, of course. We have facilitators there that facilitate, but we have structured and unstructured kind of interventions. And we also do self-care where they have trainings like sessions, session by session, up to 12 sessions, where they learn new ways to cope, new ways to like find solidarity, to yeah, normal, like calm their nervous system in most of the ways, which also in turn has they've told us, we're still doing the actual research and data collection, things like that, but they've really said how that has helped them find more purpose in the education system, like more interest in the in education. And at the same time we do like creative, so creativity is also, like we said, so they do a dance, they write poems, they do music, so through they also do arts, like we have amazing paintings from them, so they do this also. And then we also provide, you know, pads, like every lotion, hair oil, things they would need, you know, like we said, like the basic things in school. So like that also we've seen how very, and we raise a lot of awareness, like topics they wouldn't usually talk about in school. We would bring experts or ourselves to talk about mental health, sexual reproductive health, gender-based violence, things like this. So this has been really important to see how it actually, this kind of work, if later on also supports the education system. Coming to the project that you mentioned, I always call it the project of hope, because like it was during the war, during the active war, and the project started actually before that. So it was like during COVID, we were engaged in that project. So when the war happened, we didn't know what to do. And through my colleague and my mentor, he got a text from the organizations, like an email, like, you know how we get internet, like it was a hustle, but we were able to get yeah, and then it's like, how can you continue? So we communicated, and through that project we were able to have some access to internet, and we continued the work. And while we do that, like it was supposed to be an online digital learning platform for 3 months. We developed 11 courses, 12 courses, like on, like it was, we had 50 team members working for free, by the way. I'm always giving a shout out to the team there. I was coordinating the project, but it was like 50 people from the different campuses in Tigray, in Maqala University, because we had business administration, we had mental health, community health, computer science, communication, political, like like something related to political science. So it was like a very holistic kind of courses. So we were thinking to register to enroll 4,000 students, 4,400. So when we didn't have internet anymore, how are we gonna be building like the online space for that? So we have an amazing team who also have a technical background in computer science. So we explored the option to use the existing server in Leiden University and to create these videos by the teachers, to upload these videos, and then we created an app. Like it's like open source, if you know, like the Moodle app, because we were trying to make it as um, um, like that could be done in low resource areas. So with that, the students will just come once. They would come and they have a username and a code. They would register, download the videos and all the contents, and they would go home and they would learn. So because we needed like that discussion, we couldn't create that communication aspect offline. So they would come once a week to class. So they would discuss with the teachers. The rest of the time, they would take the quizzes, they would take the videos and like the courses, and then they came for the final exams. And that at that time there was drones, and then you would think, oh, they're not going to come today, or there'll be many challenges for them to actually come. And we had students who came despite feeling hungry, like they didn't have food, and they would tell us like shaking that they couldn't, like they can't attend because but they want to attend. And so many challenges. But at that time where education, well, like I think for 2 years, then almost 3 years starting COVID, the education wasn't there in Tigray, but we saw young people how hungry they were to come and to be. And it gave, even seeing young people in either at that point where it's been so quiet and we hadn't had students in years, it really brought a lot of hope, and it really brought a lot of sense of purpose and thinking, okay, it's possible, because there were many times where we could have stopped completely. And we had a lot of students that took those courses that really took them further. For example, I remember there was someone who used to drive a boat and who had who was struggling, who had many challenges feeling emotionally. And he said the mental health course, he took it in hopes that it will help him. But later on, he also understood and how to also support others. So he started, volunteering to transport survivors of sexual violence for free using his so like stories like that, we heard from there. So in low resource environment, how, because it seems impossible, right? And the students tell us, but even before the war, we didn't have this. Is this even real? Like, how did you do it? So for us, it was very interesting. And the sharing of information is amazing because how the screenshots were shared during the war, like sold, like the daily screenshots. And we saw some of our videos being shared through like the apps, like the Bluetooth sender, and going to households with those information. And we realized how the power of education and how people are determined to learn. It breaks my heart to see that a lot of young people have lost hope in education and education system for many reasons. So I think we need to restore that, and one part of it is making it, being flexible and using different tools for young people to engage. So yeah, that's the
Well,
story.
you say, Kokob, that it was teamwork, and indeed one of the defining aspects of the Tigrayan resistance during the war was Tigrayans from different walks of life, from different education, from different backgrounds, came together and got in teams and in projects and did a lot of stuff that was really innovative. And indeed, that is what it is, the project that you are describing. And I mean, they tell you to sort of resist the temptation to be nationalistic and all that. But that was one of the things that made me so proud to be Tigrayan. That people, when the chips were down, when times were difficult, people made all sorts of sacrifices to join projects and groups to contribute what they could and to do some innovative things like the education project that you did. And as I say, I think it's very innovative. And for me, broadly, there is an idea that should be explored there, because I have always, and this is speaking of shouting out, this is due to a friend of mine called Asmel Lashteka. I think a lot of my viewers will know him. Every time I spoke with him, he always mentioned the idea of making the internet available to Tigrayan children somehow. Where they could access it offline, of course. And I think there are a lot of dots to be connected here, and to build an education system that is war-proof in some sense. And that's a terrible term to use, because fingers crossed that there should not be any war in Tigray. But I think everybody senses that it's not. The Horn of Africa generally is not the most secure place, and as a result, there will always be security issues. There will always be interruptions to school and stuff. And I think if we could build a system that is resistant to that, I think that would be wonderful. And it looks like to me, maybe I'm being a little naive, I think I could see the components that would go into that system, what you have tried and what Asmelash has been thinking about, and maybe other people. Maybe I will connect you to those people, and you guys see what could be done in that respect. Just finally, Kokob, about your PhD, because we promised to our viewers that we'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Broadly speaking, in layman terms, in a way that people could relate to, what are you trying to understand now?
Yeah. For me, it's about it's trauma resilience, like I said earlier, for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence in Tigray. For me, I look at what happened, what was the intent behind it, and what contributed to it, especially in the health system aspect and the siege that follows, because that was a unique character that I found in my studies. And then now I'm on my final chapter. I'm working on, because I don't want to depict the survivors in only the light of victims, because like I told you, I saw a lot of agency and resilience. So I want to do a final chapter on the factors contributing and the risks, the risk factors, the protective and risk factors of resilience for survivors. And for me, it is documenting what happened in Tigray, and seeing what helped, what didn't help, and what can we do going forward when it comes to the trauma related to survivors of sexual violence. So generally, I think, this would be what the PhD is about. I hope that describes it.
Well, I think it's a very relevant topic, and best of luck with your PhD, Kokob, and hopefully when you finish the PhD, you're going to come on again and tell us what you will have done by then. But just I would like to say, Kokob, as we said earlier, I think Tigrayan politicians who who was supposed to change to Tigray, to bring about solutions, to get Tigray out of the dark place it is in. I think that is hopeless. Everybody knows. I think change is going to come from people like you who are really, really contributing stuff that is useful to the society. So I would like to say thank you for doing that. And like I said, I think you are, and people like you who are doing important stuff are going to be the backbone of the society. So thank you for everything that you have been doing, and thank you for your time today, Koho.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I enjoyed talking about my journey and the experiences I've had so far. Yeah, thank you for giving me the time to share that. Yeah.
It was my pleasure. It was my pleasure.